Imagine you find yourself perched on the roof of the student center at UVU. The air around you is still. You've been here long enough for the gravel to leave imprints on your arms. You've brought a rifle with you for this initiative. You know this piece well. It's been with you on so many hunting trips with your dad, with your grandpa. It's practically family. It rests beside you. Heavy. Steady. It's a solid piece. Trustworthy. Real. Below, UVU students and others have started to gather in the campus courtyard to see a famous speaker who is scheduled to give a presentation there. Some of the gathering spectators laugh, some check their phones, all of them completely oblivious to your presence. You know this speaker. You have strong feelings about them. You don't like their message, and you plan to do something about it. Just beyond the gathered crowd is a small pop-up canopy with the speaker's branding printed on it. It's probably to provide some shade from the intense mountain sun. As you check your watch for the 100th time this morning, you notice the speaker appear from behind the canopy. After a brief introduction, the speaker sits on a stool and begins fielding questions from students. You check the scope, count the seconds between your heartbeat and your breath. You remember the sound of your own voice saying you wouldn't actually do this. That was another lifetime ago. Then a thought cuts through the noise. What happens after? You don't have an answer. And that silence feels louder than everything else. You steady the weapon anyway. The world holds still. This is University of Murder, Season 3. What really happened at Utah Valley University? Episode 3. The Man on the Roof. Previously, we watched an ordinary morning at UVU spiral into chaos. A campus on lockdown, students sheltering in classrooms, and investigators scrambling to find a sniper who seemed to vanish into thin air. In Episode 2, we followed the manhunt that stretched across Utah. The drones, the helicopters, the leads that went nowhere, until a quiet knock at a police station door ended it all. Now, in Episode 3, we turn our focus to him, the man on the roof, who he was, how he got there, and what led him to believe this was the only way the world would hear him. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss Episode 4, where we'll take you inside the courtroom as the legal battle begins and every unanswered question comes crashing into the system built to decide what justice really means. Tyler Robinson grew up in Washington County, Utah, a place of clean streets, empty skies, and Sundays reserved for church. His family was active in the LDS community. By every surface measure, he was doing what you're supposed to. Honor roll grades, quiet manners, a scholarship that carried him all the way to Utah State University. He wasn't loud or rebellious. Teachers called him smart. Friends called him reserved. In a town where conformity passed for kindness, that was enough. But something shifted after high school. He left Utah State after one semester. No dramatic failure, just gone. He enrolled instead at a technical college in St. George, learning to wire buildings while the rest of his class wired their futures. To neighbors, it looked like a sensible course correction. To people who knew him better, it looked like retreat. He started to pull inward. Family visits grew shorter. Texts went unanswered. His online hours stretched longer into the night. No one can say exactly when the change began. There are no police calls, no headlines, no single moment where the bright student dimmed. What remains are fragments, a series of posts, search histories, late-night chats, the outlines of someone looking for meaning in the noise. Some people drift slowly into isolation. Others accelerate without warning. Tyler Robinson did both. What's missing from the record are the years that explain it. The quiet, ordinary years that leave no trail. The school dances he skipped. The friends who stopped calling. The moment when a boy who could have built circuits decided to burn one instead. By 2024, the quiet had turned into something else. He was still living in southern Utah, still clocking hours at his apprenticeship, but most of his life had moved online. He spent his nights on Discord, surrounded by friends who joked, gamed, and shared memes until sunrise. They were good people, or at least ordinary, none of them imagining that their chat logs would one day appear in a court file. Scrolling became ritual. Political videos, argument clips, voices promising clarity in a world that felt like noise. He started posting more often, first with sarcasm, then with anger. Algorithms noticed. They always do. Family members say he'd begun talking about hypocrisy in politics, about how both sides were broken. Nothing radical. Not yet. But somewhere between frustration and obsession, he started to believe the noise was aimed at him. Receipts, browser histories, message threads. They tell a slow story of narrowing focus. The old hobbies fell away. So did most of the people. What stayed were screens, and the endless stream of anger that passes for belonging. Investigators would later piece together those months in fragments. The purchase records, the bullet engravings, the memes he shared like coded messages. It all points to a man drifting into conviction, one click at a time. He wasn't shouting his beliefs, he was cataloging them, burying them under jokes and irony until even he might have believed they were harmless. And then came the announcement. Charlie Kirk was scheduled to speak at Utah Valley University. Robinson's mother told investigators that in a dinner conversation in the months before the shooting, he brought up the upcoming visit of Charlie Kirk to Utah Valley University, calling it a stupid venue. Then he said of Kirk, "He spreads hate. He's full of hate." The parental news startled his father, a staunch conservative. His mother said Robinson had become more politically engaged in the last year, leaning left, more pro-gay and trans rights, while his father grew more resolute in the opposite direction. Their discussions grew heated. One state filing notes that these were several discussions, especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views. At that moment, the target shifted, from generalized rumblings of frustration to a person, from drift to fixation. And the next logical question became, what do you do when you believe someone is spreading hate and you feel unheard? Kirk's visit to UVU, otherwise just a line on a campus event calendar, would become the pivot point. Friends would later remember him mentioning the event in passing, half mocking, half serious. No one heard a threat. No one heard a plan. But by then, the plan was already forming. September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University, Orem, Utah. You know what happened. If not, go back and watch episodes 1 and 2. Within hours, investigators released still images of a masked suspect dropping off the roof of the student center and quietly slipping away. While the manhunt spread across Utah County, Robinson was still active online. At roughly 6 p.m., he texted his partner at home, "Drop what you are doing, look under my keyboard." Under the keyboard was a note. "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." When she replied, asking what he meant, he sent another series of messages. "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. I've been planning this for a little over a week. I'm sorry." Investigators confirmed those texts were sent after the shooting, while the search was still underway. Around that same time, Robinson logged into Discord, the private chat server where he'd spent years gaming and joking with friends. When someone in the 30-member group posted the suspect photo and said it looked like him, Robinson responded, "That's my doppelganger trying to get me in trouble." They laughed, made jokes. One of his friends advised him to stay away from McDonald's, a reference to the apprehension of Luigi Mangione in late 2024. Hours later, at 7:57 p.m., his tone changed. He typed, "Hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this. I'm surrendering through a sheriff friend in a few moments. Thanks for all the good times and laughs. You've all been so amazing." There were no more jokes. Just before midnight, Robinson walked into the Washington County Sheriff's Office, unarmed, and surrendered. He said little. The Discord app was still open on his phone. Authorities later confirmed both the Discord message and the text exchange were genuine. They formed the clearest record of his state of mind in the hours between violence and arrest. Part confession, part farewell. Written not for history, but for the handful of friends who thought they knew him.
Tyler Robinson has never given a formal statement explaining why he shot Charlie Kirk. No press release, no courtroom testimony, no manifesto. What we know comes from fragments, messages, family interviews, and the evidence left behind. According to prosecutors, Robinson told his parents that Kirk spreads too much hate. It's the closest thing to a motive on record. In text messages to his partner after the shooting, he wrote, "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out." Those words have become the spine of the state's case, that this was a targeted, ideological act, an attempt to silence a man he saw as dangerous. But the picture is more complicated. Robinson's mother told investigators her son had shifted politically in the past year, that he'd become more pro-gay and trans rights oriented. She said he'd argued with his father about Kirk and the politics surrounding Turning Point USA's campus events. Friends confirmed the same. He talked often about intolerance, about people getting away with hate. Then there are the clues found on the bullet casings. Phrases like, "Hey fascist," "Catch," "Bella Ciao," and a string of gaming symbols that look like a cheat code. Half activism, half irony, the kind of coded humor that lives online. Investigators read them as anti-fascist slogans filtered through meme culture, the blurred language of a generation raised on both outrage and jokes. Taken together, they sketch a rough motive, a mix of ideology and identity. A man who saw Charlie Kirk not just as a political opponent, but as a threat to people he cared about, his partner, his friends, perhaps himself. Anger turned moral, then moral turned lethal. Still, the truth is that Robinson hasn't said those words out loud. Everything we know about his reasoning comes secondhand, and even in his confessions, to his partner, to his friends on Discord, he never explained why. He only said he was sorry.
Do you know what Occam's razor is? I'll provide a quick explanation for the uninitiated. Occam's razor is a problem-solving principle that states the simplest explanation for a phenomenon is the most likely to be correct. It suggests that when you have competing hypotheses, the one with fewest assumptions should be preferred. And here's what we know about Robinson and Kirk. Robinson's partner is a trans woman in the process of transitioning. Kirk was an outspoken and influential opponent of trans rights. Applying Occam's razor to the instant problem, one would suggest that Robinson wished to eliminate Kirk, who was actively working to limit the rights to which Robinson's partner and people like them would be entitled, because of the influence Kirk wielded. It is fair to assume that Robinson would feel personally attacked by Kirk's anti-LGBTQ+ statements and rhetoric. That rhetoric seems to have incited such passion within Robinson that he was driven to take the most extreme and drastic approach possible to stop Kirk's influence. To be clear, Robinson has not stated that this was the motive. We don't use Occam's razor to reach conclusions. It's a heuristic, a rule of thumb, for guiding thinking and decision-making by cutting away unnecessary complexity. Until further notice, Robinson's actual motive is unknown.
When the smoke cleared and Tyler Robinson's name went public, the silence he left behind filled up fast. He hadn't spoken to reporters. He hadn't explained himself. That vacuum became oxygen for every theory the internet could manufacture. Within hours, the story fractured. On one side, online commentators claimed Robinson was a far-right infiltrator, part of the Groyper movement, a subculture of nationalist trolls who idolize figures like Nick Fuentes. They said Kirk's murder was an internal purge, one conservative taking out another who wasn't pure enough. Investigators quickly shut that down. No records, no connections, no trace of those networks in his digital history. The opposite camp called him Antifa, a left-wing radical lashing out at a conservative voice. They pointed to the bullet casings found at the scene, stamped with phrases like, "Hey fascist, catch," and "Bella Ciao." It fit neatly into the partisan storyline, but the evidence didn't cooperate. Those same casings also carried a video game cheat code and a furry meme, proof of how irony and politics had fused in his mind until meaning itself blurred. Then came the false flag theories, claims that the government or some foreign actor had staged the shooting to divide the country. Russian state channels even pushed the idea that the real shooter was still out there. Investigators called that nonsense. But online, nonsense spreads faster than facts. A fourth wave followed. People insisting the text messages were fake, planted by prosecutors to build an airtight narrative. There's zero evidence of that. Both the partner's phone and Robinson's were seized and forensically verified. Still, screenshots labeled "scripted confession" racked up millions of views before moderators could flag them. And somewhere amid all of that came a quieter theory, one that wasn't about ideology at all. Writers and researchers started pointing to meme culture radicalization, the idea that Robinson wasn't driven by a cause so much as by the internet's endless performance of outrage. The gaming jokes, the trolling language, the half-serious activism, it was all part of the same digital fog. In that view, the shooting wasn't a political act. It was an act of terminal irony. Every theory says more about the people sharing it than it does about Robinson himself. Because the truth, stripped of hashtags and headlines, is simpler and harder. A young man picked a target, pulled a trigger, and left a nation arguing over what label to put on him. The rest is noise.
By dawn on September 11th, Tyler Robinson was in custody. He said little to investigators. The words on his phone, the note, and the Discord confession were already enough. Within hours, prosecutors charged him with aggravated murder and announced their intent to seek the death penalty. The news cycle ignited again. Charlie Kirk supporters held vigils across the country. For them, the shooting was proof that free speech itself was under attack. Others mourned the loss without the politics, remembering a man whose name had become larger than his life. At Robinson's home in southern Utah, a different kind of silence settled in. His parents asked for privacy. His partner left the apartment and entered protective custody for a time, overwhelmed by reporters and threats. Investigators combed through every message, every online trace, every meme. In Washington, hearings began almost immediately. Senators demanded answers about digital radicalization and the role of platforms like Discord. Executives promised cooperation, new moderation tools, more oversight, promises that have been made before. As the weeks passed, the story fractured again, as all stories do in the modern age. On social media, Kirk became a martyr, Robinson a monster, and everyone else a detective. But in court filings and police interviews, the details stayed plain. A single shot, a handwritten note, and a trail of words trying to explain the unexplainable. The trial is still ahead. Prosecutors will argue ideology. The defense may argue instability. And the rest of us are left with questions that can't be cross-examined. What turns anger into certainty? When does conviction become permission? And how many more of these stories will begin the same way? A young man, a screen, a grievance, and end in silence. This is University of Murder, Season 3. What really happened at UVU? Next episode, the legal war begins. Inside the courtroom, where motive meets the law, and the fight over what this act really means begins.
If you enjoyed this, please consider hitting the like button, and if you want more content like this, please subscribe. That's the best way to encourage us to keep making this content for your consumption and enjoyment.